Captain Jimin walked across the metal floor of the Earth Defense Station. His boots made loud sounds with each step. The walls around him were covered with screens showing space and all the empty darkness beyond. He had been watching those screens for 3 days now, waiting for something that everyone knew was coming, but no one wanted to see. The big window at the front of the command center showed nothing but stars. They looked peaceful, like tiny diamonds scattered across black cloth. But Jimin knew that somewhere out there in that darkness, the biggest war fleet in galactic history was moving toward Earth. He could feel it in his bones, the way sailors used to feel, storms coming across old oceans. Behind him, 20 officers worked. At their stations, their faces were pale, and their hands moved quickly across control panels. Everyone was trying to look busy, but Jimin could see the fear in their eyes. They all knew the numbers. They all knew what was coming toward them from the deep spaces between worlds. A young woman named Somi sat at the communications station. Her job was to listen for messages from other human colonies scattered across nearby star systems. For the past week, those messages had been getting fewer and fewer. Some colonies had gone completely silent. Others sent only short, desperate calls for help before their signals stopped forever. Sami pressed her headphones closer to her ears and tried to tune in another frequency. She had been doing this for hours, hoping to hear something good, some piece of news that might give them hope. But every message she received made things seem worse than before. The alien fleet was huge, bigger than anything humans had ever seen or imagined on the other side. Of the command center, Admiral Nari stood looking at a large table covered with glowing maps. The maps showed every human world, every space station, every ship that Earth had built in the 50 years since humans first learned to travel between stars. The numbers were not good. Not good at all. Nari had gray hair and tired eyes. She had been a soldier for 30 years and had fought in every major conflict that humanity faced, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for this. The enemy they were facing was not just one alien race. It was all of them working together for the first time in millions of years. A young officer named Hajin approached the admiral with a data pad in his shaking hands. He was barely 20 years old and had joined the Space Force because he wanted to explore new worlds. Now he was about to face the greatest threat in human history. His voice cracked when he spoke. The information on Hajin's data pad was worse than anyone had expected. The alien fleet contained ships from 12 different species. Each species had technology that was thousands of years more advanced than anything humans possessed. Some of these aliens had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves on. Earth Commander Tay walked over to join them at the strategy table. He was a calm man who rarely showed emotion, but even he could not hide the worry on his face as he looked at the tactical displays. The enemy had enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Their shields could stop weapons that humans did not even know how to build. The 3 military leaders stood around the glowing table and tried to find some way to defend their home world. But every strategy they considered seemed hopeless. The aliens had more ships, more weapons, more soldiers and technology that was like magic compared to human equipment. How could Earth possibly survive against such overwhelming force across the solar system on Mars? Colony Private Yuna watched the red sky through a small window. She was 19 years old and had signed up for military service because she wanted to see the universe. Now she was stationed on a mining colony that might become a battlefield within days. The thought made her stomach feel sick. The Mars colony was home to 50,000 people. Most of them were miners and engineers who had come from Earth to build a new life under the alien sky. They had built their homes and raised their families, believing that humanity had found its place among the stars. Now all of that was threatened. Yuna walked through the colony corridors and saw families preparing to evacuate children. Asked their parents why they had to leave their toys behind. Adults packed only the most important belongings, into small bags. Everyone moved with quiet urgency, like people fleeing from a natural disaster in the colony meeting hall. Dr. Bora was explaining the situation to a crowd of worried citizens. She was a smart woman who understood alien technology better than most humans. But even she could not find encouraging words to share with the frightened colonists around her. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Coalition, and they ruled most of the known galaxy. They had sent Earth an ultimatum that was simple and terrifying. Humanity must stop expanding to new worlds and accept alien control over all human activities. If Earth refused, the coalition would destroy every human colony and turn Earth itself into a dead world. Dr. Bora tried to explain why the aliens feared humanity so much. Humans had spread to 40 different star systems in just 50 years. Most alien species took thousands of years to expand that far. Humans also had a habit of adapting quickly to new environments and solving problems in ways that other species found unpredictable. The coalition leaders believed that humanity was dangerous, not because humans were violent, but because they were too successful, too adaptable, and too unpredictable. They worried that if humans continued to spread across the galaxy, they might eventually challenge alien authority everywhere. Back on the Earth Defense Station, Captain Jimin received a priority message from Earth Command. The message was brief and came directly from the President of Earth government. All human military forces were ordered to prepare for immediate combat. The time for diplomacy was over. Jimin gathered his officers around him and read the message aloud. When he finished reading, nobody spoke for a long moment. Everyone understood what those orders meant. Earth was going to fight even though the odds of winning seemed impossible. The captain looked at each face around him. These were good people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. They came from different countries and backgrounds, but they shared one thing in common. None of them were willing to surrender without a fight. Lieutenant Do-hyun stepped forward and asked the question that everyone was thinking. How could they possibly win against an enemy that outnumbered them 10,000 to 1? The alien ships were bigger, faster, and more powerful than anything humans had ever built. Captain Jimin did not have a good answer to that question, but he remembered something his grandfather had told him years ago when he was a child facing bullies at school. Sometimes the person who wins a fight is not the strongest or the biggest. Sometimes it is the person who refuses to give up no matter what happens. The Gi communication system crackled to life and Soma's voice filled the command center. She had received a message from the outer sensor stations. The alien fleet had been detected at the edge of the solar system. They would arrive at Earth in less than 18 hours. Everyone in the command center went quiet as they absorbed this news. 18 hours to prepare for the greatest battle in human history. 18 hours before they would learn whether humanity had a future among the stars, or whether Earth would become just another dead world in alien history books. Admiral Nari looked around at all the young faces surrounding her. Many of these officers would probably die in the coming battle, but she could see something in their eyes that gave her hope. It was not fear or despair. It was determination, the same quality that had driven humans to leave Earth in the first place. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. They were about to discover that humans had one advantage that could not be measured in weapons or technology. They had the ability to keep fighting even when victory seemed impossible. They had something that most alien species had forgotten over millions of years of easy conquest. They had will. The alien ships appeared in Earth space, like a swarm of metal insects blocking out the stars. Captain Hyun watched from the bridge of his destroyer as hundreds of massive vessels emerged from hyperspace. Their hulls were dark and covered with weapons. Ports that glowed with deadly energy. Hyun had been a fighter pilot for 15 years before commanding his own ship. He had fought pirates and rebels in the outer colonies, but nothing had prepared him for this sight. The smallest alien cruiser was 10 times bigger than his destroyer, and there were thousands of them filling the space around Earth. The Coalition fleet moved in perfect formation like a school of fish swimming through dark water. Their ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, with smooth curves and glowing lines that pulsed with alien technology. Each vessel looked like it had been grown rather than built, as if the aliens had learned to make their machines from living things. Admiral Nari stood in the Earth Defense Center, watching the tactical displays that showed red dots spreading across the solar system. The alien fleet was so large that her computers could not count all the ships. They just showed error messages and warned that the enemy numbers exceeded maximum display capacity. The first attack came without warning. Beams of pure energy lanced out from the alien ships and struck the orbital defense platforms around Earth. The platforms had been humanity's pride, massive space stations armed with the most powerful weapons that human science could create. They lasted exactly 4 seconds. Yun watched in horror as Defense Platform Alpha simply vanished in a ball of white light. The explosion was so bright that his ship's cameras automatically dimmed to protect human eyes. When the light faded, there was nothing left where the platform had been. Not even debris, just empty space. The alien weapons did not make sounds in the vacuum of space, but Yun could feel their power through his ship's hull. Every time the enemy fired, the metal around him vibrated like a drum. The energy readings on his instruments went crazy as waves of radiation washed over his small vessel. On Luna base, engineer Bora felt the first impacts through the metal floor of the underground facility. The lunar surface above her was being pounded by alien artillery that could crack moons in half. She knew that her base would not survive much longer, but she was not ready to give up. Bora had been working on the lunar mining operation for 8 years. She had helped dig the tunnels and build the reactors that powered the human presence on Earth's moon. Now she was watching everything she had worked for being destroyed by enemies who saw humans as nothing more than dangerous insects. The main reactor took a direct hit, and Bora knew they had maybe 10 minutes before the whole facility exploded. She gathered her engineering team and explained her plan. They were going to turn the reactor into a weapon. The aliens wanted to destroy the base anyway, so why not take some of them down too? Working with desperate speed, Bora's team removed all the safety controls from the fusion reactor. They rerouted power cables and disabled the cooling systems. The reactor began to overheat exactly as they intended. When the alien ground troops landed to secure the base, they would find a surprise waiting for them. Lieutenant Tay was coordinating the evacuation of New Sol Colony when the alien war machines appeared on the horizon. They looked like giant metal spiders walking across the landscape on 6 legs. Each machine was as tall as a building and carried enough firepower to level a city block. The colonists had been preparing for this day ever since the Coalition ultimatum arrived. 3 months ago, they had started digging hidden bunkers beneath the colony buildings that looked normal. From the outside had been converted into fortresses, streets had been mined, and every intersection had hidden weapon caches. Hay had studied every piece of information about alien ground tactics that Earth intelligence could provide. The aliens were used to fighting enemies who tried to preserve their cities and minimize damage. They expected humans to surrender once their military forces were defeated. But the humans of New Sol had a different plan. They were going to make the aliens pay for every street, every building, and every block of their colony. Even if they lost the battle, they would make sure. The victory cost the Coalition more than they expected as the alien war machines entered the colony. Outskirts, they triggered the first set of explosives. Buildings collapsed on top of the invaders, crushing some machines and blocking the streets. For others, hidden weapon positions opened fire with stolen alien technology that the humans had been studying for months. The aliens had expected to walk through the colony unopposed. Instead, they found themselves fighting for every meter of ground. Human defenders popped up from underground tunnels, fired their weapons, and then disappeared before return fire could reach them. back in space. Captain Hyun made a decision that would be remembered for centuries. His destroyer was badly damaged and surrounded by enemy cruisers. He could try to escape and maybe survive for a few more minutes, or he could make his death count for something. Hyun ordered his crew to abandon ship in the escape pods. Then he locked the navigation system on a collision course with the largest alien vessel in range. His destroyer was tiny compared to the enemy cruiser, but it was moving at full speed, and the aliens did not expect such a desperate tactic. The impact destroyed both ships in a spectacular explosion that lit up the space around Earth. Other human captains saw what Hyun had done and began making similar attacks. Suddenly, the aliens found themselves dealing with enemies who treated their own lives as weapons. On Mars' colony, Private Una watched the space battle through the colony's telescopes. She could see the flashes of light as human ships died, fighting impossible odds. But she also noticed something else. The alien formation was becoming more cautious. They were spreading out and moving more slowly. The coalition commanders had expected this to be a simple extermination mission. They had brought overwhelming force and advanced technology to crush a primitive enemy. But the humans were not fighting like any species they had encountered. Instead of trying to preserve their forces and fight a conventional battle, the humans seemed determined to inflict maximum damage, even at the cost of their own lives. Every human ship that died took at least one alien vessel with it. Every human position that fell made the aliens pay a terrible price. General Minji received combat reports from across the solar system and began to see a pattern. The humans were losing badly in terms of ships and territory, but they were also achieving something unexpected. They were making the aliens afraid. The coalition species had ruled the galaxy for millions of years through superior technology and overwhelming force. They had never faced an enemy that refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. They had never fought against opponents who seemed to welcome death if it meant hurting their enemies. As the first day of battle ended, the alien fleet had achieved all of its tactical objectives. They had destroyed the human orbital. Defenses captured the outer colonies and established control over most of the solar system. But their casualties were 10 times higher than their battle computers had predicted. Admiral Nari looked at the damage reports and realized something important. The aliens had won every battle, but they were already starting to change their tactics. They were being more careful, more cautious. They were beginning to fear the cost of fighting humans. On Luna Base, Engineer Boris' plan worked perfectly. When the alien troops entered the main reactor chamber, they triggered the explosion she had prepared. The blast took out an entire regiment of coalition soldiers and left a crater where the base used to be. Lieutenant Tay and his colonists fought from there. Underground bunkers for 6 hours before the aliens finally controlled the surface of New Sol. But the victory had cost the coalition 3 full battalions and dozens of war machines. The aliens were learning that conquering human territory was expensive. Private Una received new orders from Mars. Command all remaining human forces were to fall back to prepared positions and continue fighting from hidden bases. The conventional phase of the war was over. Now the real battle would begin. The aliens controlled the space around Earth and had occupied most of the human colonies, but they were about to discover something that would change the course of the war. They were about to learn that defeating human armies was much easier than defeating. The human spirit Captain Jimin survived the first day of battle, but his space station was badly damaged. Half of his crew was dead, and his weapons were destroyed, but he was still alive and still fighting. The aliens had won the first round, but the war was far from over. The galaxy had tried to crush Earth with overwhelming force and superior technology, but they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that humans would fight like other species. They had not understood that for humans. Surrender was not an option even when victory seemed impossible. 3 months after the first alien attack, Sergeant Doyun crawled through the ruins of what used to be downtown Tokyo. The buildings around him were twisted metal and broken concrete, but he knew every hiding place, every tunnel, and every trap that his team had prepared in the rubble. The aliens thought they had conquered Earth, but they were learning that destroying human cities was much easier than controlling them. Every day, Coalition patrols ventured into the ruins looking for human survivors. Every day, fewer of those patrols came back. Do-hyun's resistance cell consisted of 12 fighters who had been ordinary citizens before the invasion. There was Minji, who used to teach children at a local school, Wonho, who had repaired computers for a living, and Ara, who had been studying medicine at the university. Now, they were all soldiers in a war nobody had wanted. The team moved through the underground tunnels that connected the subway system to the old sewer networks. The aliens had powerful sensors that could detect human life signs, but the tunnels were full of radiation from destroyed power plants, and the electronic interference made their technology less effective. Above ground, an alien patrol of 6 warriors in powered armor was searching through the remains of a shopping district. Their armor was silver and blue with energy shields that could stop bullets and explosions. The warriors carried weapons that could melt through tank armor with a single shot. The patrol leader stopped and consulted his scanner. He was getting readings that suggested human activity in this area, but the signals were weak and scattered. His species had conquered hundreds of worlds, but Earth was different. The humans seemed to be everywhere, and nowhere at the same time. Do-hyun watched the aliens through a hidden camera that Wonho had installed in a pile of rubble. The patrol was following a predictable pattern, walking down the main street and checking each building systematically. They had done this same patrol route for 2 weeks now, and today they were going to pay for their predictability. Minji was positioned 3 blocks away with a stolen alien weapon that she had learned to operate by watching Coalition training videos. The aliens had never imagined that humans would be smart enough to understand their technology. They had certainly never expected humans to turn that technology against them. The explosion came from beneath the aliens' feet. Ara had planted the bomb. In the old subway tunnel directly under the patrol route, the blast created a crater 15 meters wide and sent chunks of concrete flying in every direction. 2 of the 6 aliens died instantly. The surviving aliens immediately took defensive positions and began scanning for the source of the attack. Their training had taught them to expect enemies who would stand and fight like civilized soldiers. They were not prepared for opponents who attacked and then disappeared like ghosts. Wonho triggered the second part of the ambush. From hidden positions around the patrol route, human fighters opened fire with captured alien weapons. The energy beams lit up the ruins with deadly light, but before the aliens could return fire effectively, the humans had already vanished back into their tunnels. The patrol leader called for backup and medical support, but it would take 20 minutes for help to arrive. His remaining warriors formed a defensive circle and waited nervously. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every piece of rubble could conceal a weapon. On Europa Station, Dr. So-young worked in a hidden laboratory that had been carved out of the ice beneath the surface. The aliens had bombed the main colony, but they had never suspected that humans had built emergency facilities deep underground where their sensors could not reach. So-young had been studying captured alien technology for months, trying to understand how their weapons and shields worked. She had made several important discoveries that could help the human resistance fight more effectively against their technologically superior enemies. The alien energy shields were incredibly powerful, but they were designed to stop the kind of weapons that other alien species used. They had weak points that could be exploited by projectile weapons fired at specific frequencies. Human bullets traveling at just the right speed could penetrate the shields completely. She had also discovered that alien communication systems used quantum entanglement to send messages instantly across vast distances, but the same technology that made their communications so fast also made them vulnerable to interference if humans could generate the right kind of electromagnetic pulse worker. Seok had been a factory supervisor before the war, but now he managed something much more important. He coordinated the underground network that moved supplies and information between resistance cells across the solar system. The aliens could not. understand how human resistance groups were able to work together so effectively. The coalition had destroyed all the major communication satellites and space stations, but somehow the humans still managed to coordinate their attacks across multiple star systems. What the aliens did not know was that humans had been preparing for this possibility ever since first contact with alien civilizations. Sayok and thousands of other workers had spent years building secret communication networks and supply caches that could operate even during a total war. The network used everything from hidden radio transmitters to coded messages carried by civilian refugees. Moving through the ruins of human civilization were ordinary people who carried vital intelligence to resistance fighters. The aliens saw only defeated civilians, but missed the invisible army of messengers. On Mars colony, the situation was similar to Earth. Alien forces controlled the main settlements, but the vast tunnel networks of the mining operation had become a fortress that stretched beneath half the planet. Captain Yuna now commanded a company of miners who had become expert tunnel fighters. The Martian tunnels were perfect for guerrilla warfare. They extended for thousands of kilometers beneath the surface and connected to underground factories that could manufacture weapons and supplies. The aliens could bomb the surface, but they could not reach the humans who lived like moles in the rock. Yuna's company had captured an alien supply depot by tunneling beneath it and attacking from below. The coalition forces never expected enemies to emerge from solid rock. They had sensors that could detect movement on the surface but not deep underground. The captured supplies included food, medical equipment, and most importantly, alien weapons that the humans could study and copy. The resistance fighters learned to use enemy technology better than some aliens used it themselves because humans had to understand every detail to survive. Lieutenant Ji-hoon commanded a sabotage team that specialized in destroying alien infrastructure. The coalition needed massive amounts of resources to maintain their occupation force, and they had to bring those resources from their home worlds, light years away. Ji-hoon's team focused on supply lines, communication relays, and fuel depots. Any target that would make life more difficult for the occupying army was fair game. They moved through the ruins like shadows striking, quickly and disappearing before the aliens could respond. The psychological effect was as important as the physical damage. Every successful attack made the alien soldiers more nervous, more paranoid, and more likely to make mistakes. The coalition forces found themselves afraid to patrol alone, afraid to trust their equipment, and afraid to sleep at night. After 6 months of occupation, the alien commanders were facing a problem they had never encountered in millions of years of conquest. They had achieved total military victory, but they were losing control of the territory they had conquered. The human resistance was not getting weaker as time passed. Instead, it was growing stronger, more organized, and more effective. The aliens were bleeding resources and personnel in endless small battles that never seemed to accomplish anything permanent. General Kofi of the coalition fleet read the casualty reports with growing concern. His forces had lost more soldiers in 6 months of occupation than in the previous century of galactic conquest. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had studied in military school. Traditional military doctrine said that defeated enemies would eventually surrender when the cost of resistance became too high. But the humans seemed to get more determined as their situation became more desperate. Every defeated resistance cell inspired 2 more to take its place. The coalition had technology that could destroy planets, but they could not use it on worlds they wanted to occupy. They needed the human colonies intact to justify the enormous cost of the invasion, but intact colonies meant that human survivors could continue fighting from hiding. Dr. Ara worked in a hidden medical facility, treating wounded resistance fighters. She had learned to perform surgery with captured alien medical equipment and had developed new treatments using alien technology, combined with human knowledge. The wounded fighters she treated would return to battle as soon as they were able. Many of them had been injured multiple times, but they never spoke of surrender or giving up. The alien occupation forces were learning that humans had a different relationship with defeat than other species, Commander. Sunwoo analyzed intelligence reports from across human space and began to see patterns in the alien behavior. The coalition forces were adapting their tactics, becoming more cautious, and requiring larger forces to hold the same territory. This was exactly what the resistance leaders had hoped for. The longer the war continued, the more expensive it became for the aliens. Eventually, the coalition would have to decide whether Captain Jin Young floated through the dark corridors of an abandoned alien command ship that his salvage team had discovered drifting in the asteroid belt. The massive vessel had been damaged in a battle with human forces 3 months earlier, and its crew had evacuated, leaving behind technology that could change the course of the war. The ship was huge, even by alien standards, with corridors wide enough for 3 humans to walk side by side. The walls were covered with symbols and displays that glowed with soft blue light. Jin Young had never seen anything so advanced and beautiful. But he knew that this floating palace of technology had been built to destroy his home world. Communications Officer Young Hee worked frantically at the alien command console, trying to access their computer systems. The symbols and language were completely foreign, but she had been studying captured alien equipment for months and was beginning to understand their basic operating principles after 6 hours of careful work. Young Hee managed to break through the security systems and access the ship's communication logs. What she found there made her hands shake with excitement. These were not just battle reports, but detailed discussions between coalition leaders about the war. The intelligence was incredible. The aliens were having serious disagreements about how to handle the human problem. Several species wanted to withdraw from the coalition because the war was becoming too expensive. Others wanted to use more extreme weapons, even if it meant destroying the worlds they were trying to conquer. Commander Sunwoo read Young Hee's report with growing amazement. The coalition was not the unified enemy that humans had imagined it was. An alliance of convenience between species that had their own interests and priorities. The longer the war lasted, the more those different interests would conflict. The intercepted messages revealed that the Zephyrian Empire was spending enormous amounts of money to maintain their part of the coalition fleet. Their economy was beginning to suffer, and their citizens were questioning why they needed to fight a war on the other side of the galaxy. The Crystalline Confederacy was having similar problems, but for different reasons. Their soldiers were not adapted for the kind of brutal ground fighting that Earth required. Many of their warriors were suffering from psychological trauma after months of guerrilla warfare in human cities. Most importantly, the alien leadership was beginning to doubt their original assessment of the human threat. The intercepted communications showed that coalition scientists were studying human behavior and coming to disturbing conclusions. Dr. Kenji, one of the coalition researchers, had written a report arguing that humans were not actually interested in conquering other species. They were expanding rapidly because they were curious and adaptable, not because they wanted to build an empire. This meant that the entire justification for the war might be based on a misunderstanding. Intelligence Officer Da-Hyun spent weeks analyzing the alien communications and discovered something that changed everything the coalition species thought. In terms of cost and benefit, they would continue fighting as long as victory seemed profitable, but they had never encountered an enemy for whom survival was the only acceptable outcome. This difference in thinking gave humanity a huge advantage. The aliens calculated whether the war was worth fighting, but humans simply fought because the alternative was extinction. The longer the war lasted, the more obvious this difference became. Pilot Jihoon volunteered for a mission that would test this theory. He would fly a captured alien scout ship loaded with explosives deep into coalition territory and attack their main supply depot. The mission was basically suicide, but it would prove that humans could strike anywhere. Ji-hoon had been a cargo pilot before the war, flying supplies between the outer colonies. Now he was about to attempt the most dangerous mission in military history. He knew he probably would not survive, but he also knew that his sacrifice might save billions of human lives. The journey to the Coalition supply depot took 2 weeks flying through alien-controlled space using stolen identification codes. The alien scout ship was fast, and its stealth systems were better than anything humans had developed, but discovery would mean instant death. The supply depot was a massive space station orbiting a gas giant in the Proxima system. It was supposed to be one of the most heavily defended installations in Coalition space, protected by energy shields and automated weapon systems that could destroy entire fleets. But the aliens had never expected to be attacked by one of their own ships, using their own identification codes. Ji-hoon flew straight through their defenses and docked with the station before anyone realized he was an enemy. His ship looked exactly like hundreds of other Coalition vessels. The explosion destroyed the entire supply depot and 3 nearby ships. The loss of supplies and equipment would force the Coalition to delay their planned offensive against the remaining human colonies. But more importantly, the psychological impact was enormous. For the first time in the war, humans had struck deep into alien territory. If Earth could attack the supposedly secure heart of Coalition, space then nowhere was truly safe. The alien civilians began to question whether this war was worth the risk to their own worlds. The Coalition leadership called an emergency council to discuss the deteriorating situation. Several species were already questioning their commitment to the alliance. The economic costs were higher than expected. The casualties were mounting, and now their own territory was under threat. Admiral Nari received the intelligence reports about the alien council meetings and realized that humanity had reached a turning point. The aliens were no longer united in their determination to destroy Earth. Some were looking for a way out of the war. The key was to exploit these divisions before the Coalition could find a new strategy. The human resistance needed to increase pressure on the alien alliance while making it clear that some species could negotiate separate peace deals. Major Insun led a series of coordinated attacks against Coalition outposts that were designed to send a political message. Each attack targeted forces from specific alien species while avoiding others. The message was clear. Some aliens were enemies, but others might become friends. The Vorthan Republic had been one of the most enthusiastic supporters of the war, but their ground troops were suffering heavy casualties in urban combat on Earth. Their military leaders began to suggest that maybe diplomacy might be more effective than warfare. The Ethereal Collective had joined the Coalition because they feared human expansion into their territory. But months of studying human behavior had convinced them that humans were not actually interested in conquest. They were explorers, not conquerors. Dr. So-young published her research on alien psychology through the underground communication network. Her analysis showed that most Coalition species had joined the alliance because they were afraid, not because they were aggressive. Each species could be approached differently. The turning point came when the first alien species officially withdrew from the Coalition. The Harmony Syndicate announced that they were pulling their forces back to defensive positions around their home worlds. They were no longer interested in fighting an offensive war against humanity. This defection caused panic among the remaining Coalition members. If the alliance started falling apart, each species would be vulnerable to human retaliation. Several other species immediately began secret negotiations. With human representatives, Ambassador Wonho found himself conducting the strangest diplomatic meetings in history. He was negotiating with beings who had tried to exterminate his species just months earlier. But both sides were beginning to realize that the war was too costly to continue. The aliens had superior technology and greater numbers, but they were learning that these advantages meant nothing against an enemy with unlimited determination. The humans had inferior equipment, but they had something more valuable: The absolute refusal to give up Captain Yuna watched from her underground command post on Mars as alien forces began withdrawing from some human colonies. The coalition was not retreating because they were defeated militarily. They were retreating because they were being defeated economically and psychologically. The occupation was costing more than the aliens had ever imagined. Human resistance was not decreasing over time. It was becoming more organized, more effective, and more expensive to suppress. The longer the war continued, the more obvious it became that humanity would never surrender. Engineer Bora analyzed the withdrawal patterns and realized what was happening. The aliens were pulling back from positions that were too expensive to hold. They were learning to think like humans, calculating the cost of every battle and every occupation. General Minji issued new orders to all human forces. The goal was no longer just survival. It was to make continued warfare so expensive that more alien species would choose to negotiate rather than fight. The war was becoming a contest of willpower rather than firepower. The galaxy had tried to crush Earth with overwhelming force, but they were discovering that force alone could not defeat an enemy that refused to acknowledge defeat. The coalition had control of space and most human territory, but humanity had something stronger. They had the will to keep fighting no matter what happened. The turning point was not marked by a great battle or a dramatic victory. Instead, it was marked by the gradual realization on both sides that this war could only end through negotiation. The question was no longer whether humanity. 18 months after the first alien attack, Fleet Admiral Yuna stood on the bridge of the battleship New Terra, watching as the largest human fleet in history prepared to launch Operation Phoenix. The ship beneath her feet was built from salvaged alien technology combined with human engineering and powered by the determination of people who had nothing left to lose. The New Terra had once been 3 different alien cruisers that human engineers had welded together into something completely new. The hull was a patchwork of human steel and alien alloys, but every system had been designed by people who understood that this might be their last chance to strike back. Around the flagship, 200 other ships waited for the attack order. Some were captured alien vessels, others were human ships rebuilt with stolen technology. All of them carried crews that had lost friends, family, or entire worlds to the coalition. Occupation Yuna had been a simple colonial administrator before the war, but 18 months of fighting had turned her into something harder. She had learned to think like the aliens, to use their own tactics against them, and most importantly, she had learned that humans could be just as ruthless as any species. In the galaxy, when their survival was at stake, the target was the Coalition military headquarters in the Centauri system, where the alien high command coordinated their occupation of human space. Intelligence reports suggested that the facility was heavily defended, but also that its destruction would throw the entire Coalition war effort into chaos. Captain Kyung-ho commanded the assault group that would attack the space station directly. His ships were fast attack vessels built for hit and run missions. But today, they would have to fight their way through the heaviest defenses in Coalition space. Kyung-ho's pilots were all veterans of the underground war. They had learned to fight against impossible odds, and they had developed a reputation for achieving missions that other species considered suicidal. The aliens had nicknamed them Death Seekers because they seemed to welcome dangerous assignments. The attack began at exactly 0600 Galactic Standard Time with simultaneous strikes across 12 different star systems. Every remaining human military unit attacked at once, creating chaos and confusion throughout Coalition territory on the Outer Rim. Major Ensign led ground forces in an assault on an alien supply base. Her soldiers moved through enemy territory like ghosts, using captured equipment and alien uniforms to get close to their targets. The Coalition guards never suspected that the maintenance workers approaching their facility were actually human. Commandos Inson's team had studied alien behavior patterns for months. They knew how coalition soldiers thought, how they reacted to different situations, and most importantly, how to exploit their weaknesses. The aliens were used to fighting enemies, who followed predictable military doctrines. The supply base fell in less than an hour with minimal human casualties. The alien defenders were completely unprepared for enemies who used their own tactics against them better than they used them themselves. The humans had learned to think like aliens while remaining unpredictably human. At the main battle, Admiral Yuna watched as her fleet engaged the coalition defenses around their headquarters. The alien space station was massive with weapon systems that could destroy planets, but it was designed to fight conventional enemies, not the hybrid human-alien fleet that was attacking it. The human ships moved in formations that combined alien tactical precision with human unpredictability. They followed standard coalition battle protocols until suddenly breaking formation and attacking from unexpected angles. The alien defenders found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to know their every move. Captain Kyung-ho led his assault ships through the outer defenses using a maneuver that no alien species had ever attempted. His ships flew directly toward the heaviest enemy fire, then used captured alien stealth technology to disappear from sensors at the last second. The coalition defenders fired at targets that were no longer there while the human ships attacked from completely different angles. The confusion lasted only minutes, but it was enough for Kyung-ho's force to penetrate the inner defensive ring engineer. Yunwoo worked frantically. In the captured alien shipyard that her team had seized 6 months earlier, the facility was now producing human-designed warships using coalition manufacturing technology. The aliens watched in horror as their own industrial capacity was turned against them. The new ships coming off the production line were unlike anything ever seen before. They combined the best features of human and alien design with improvements that neither species had thought of separately. The hybrid technology was more effective than either culture could achieve alone. Yunwoo had spent her entire career before the war designing mining equipment. Now she was creating weapons of war that were giving humanity its first real advantage in the conflict. Her ships were faster, stronger, and more versatile than anything in the coalition fleet. The battle for the headquarters station lasted 8 hours and ended when Kyung-ho's assault team managed to board the facility through maintenance shafts that the aliens had never thought to guard properly. The human commandos fought their way to the command center using alien weapons and tactics. The psychological impact of the victory was enormous. For the first time since the war began, humans had achieved a major, offensive success against the coalition. The alien leadership was forced to evacuate their primary command facility and retreat to secondary positions. But the real victory was not military, it was political. The successful human attacks had proven that the coalition was not invincible. Several more alien species immediately opened secret negotiations with human representatives, looking for a way out of the increasingly expensive war. Terara received reports from resistance cells across human space that coalition forces were beginning to withdraw from some occupied territories. The aliens were not retreating because they were militarily defeated. They were retreating because the cost of occupation was becoming unbearable. The withdrawal was not coordinated or organized. Each alien species was making its own decision about which territories were worth holding. The unity that had made the coalition so powerful was cracking under the pressure of human resistance. Lieutenant Do-yoon emerged from the ruins of Tokyo to find that the alien occupation force had pulled back to a few heavily fortified positions. The streets that had been patrolled by enemy soldiers for over a year were suddenly empty. Human civilians began appearing. From their hiding places, the liberation was not complete. The aliens still controlled the spaceports and major industrial facilities, but for the first time since the invasion began, humans could walk openly in their own cities. The psychological effect was incredible. Commander Sunwoo analyzed intelligence reports from the successful attacks and realized that Operation Phoenix had achieved more than just military objectives. It had demonstrated that humans could fight effectively using alien technology and tactics while maintaining their own unique advantages. The human forces were no longer the desperate resistance fighters who had hidden in tunnels and ruins. They were becoming a professional military that could match coalition forces in conventional warfare, while retaining the guerrilla skills they had developed during the occupation. Worker Seok coordinated the expansion of the communication network to newly liberated territories. For the first time in 18 months, human settlements could communicate openly with each other. The flow of information and supplies increased dramatically. The improved communications revealed the true extent of human survival during the occupation. Millions of people had survived in hidden bases, underground facilities, and remote outposts. The human population was much larger than the coalition had believed. Captain Jimin now commanded a mixed fleet of human and captured alien vessels. His ships patrolled the space around Earth, driving off coalition reconnaissance missions and protecting the supply lines that were bringing resources to the liberated territories. The aliens were learning that controlling space was not the same as controlling planets, human ground. Forces could make alien occupation so expensive that it was not worth maintaining even when the coalition had total space superiority. Admiral Neri established the new Earth Defense Command in a facility that had been hidden beneath the ruins of Geneva. The command center was built using alien technology but operated according to human military principles, combining the best of both approaches. The counterattack phase was ending, but it had achieved its primary objective. The coalition was no longer a unified enemy. Several species had already withdrawn from the alliance, and others were negotiating ceasefires with human forces. The balance of power was shifting. The aliens still had technological superiority, but they were no longer certain of victory. The cost of continuing the war was rising, while the benefits were becoming unclear. Pilot Jihoon's sacrifice at the coalition supply depot had inspired a new generation of human pilots who were willing to take enormous risks to achieve victory. But unlike the desperate suicide missions of the early war, these attacks were carefully planned operations with realistic chances of success. The galaxy had tried to crush Earth with overwhelming force, but humanity had survived. The worst that the coalition could do. Now humans were fighting back, using the aliens' own technology and tactics against them. The question was no longer whether humanity would survive, but whether the aliens could afford to. The war ended, not with explosions or surrender ceremonies, but with a series of quiet meetings in neutral space stations scattered across the galaxy. Ambassador Wanho found himself sitting across from beings who had once planned to exterminate every human in existence, now discussing trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. The conference room was designed to accommodate 12 different alien species with atmosphere controls and gravity adjusters for each delegation. The humans sat in simple chairs breathing normal air, while their former enemies required complex environmental suits to survive in the shared space. Wanho had been a university professor before the war, teaching ancient human history to students who thought that interstellar conflict was something from primitive times. Now he was negotiating the future of galactic civilization with species that were older than human. Written language. The peace terms were surprisingly simple after 2 years of devastating warfare. Each alien species would recognize humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs, with the right to expand and colonize as they chose. In exchange, humans would share their most important discovery, the secret of never giving up. The Zephyrian Empire was the first to sign a formal treaty with Earth. Their representative was a tall, blue-skinned being who spoke in musical tones. She explained that her people had spent enormous resources fighting humans and gained nothing in return. Peace would allow both species to focus on exploration instead of destruction. Admiral Yuna now served as the human military liaison to the former coalition species. Her job was to help them understand how human forces had been so effective against seemingly impossible odds. Many alien military leaders wanted to study human training methods and psychological techniques. The secret was not complicated, but it was difficult for other species to understand. Humans had fought effectively because they treated survival as the only acceptable outcome. They could not surrender because surrender meant extinction. This gave them advantages that could not be measured in weapons or technology. Captain Jimin stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, the first joint human-alien research facility built in neutral space. Through the transparent walls, he could see ships from dozens of different species working together on projects that would benefit everyone. The station was studying regions of space. Beyond coalition territory where unknown civilizations might exist, the same human drive for exploration that had frightened the coalition was now being used to expand knowledge for all galactic species. Dr. So Young published her research.